So welcome back, everyone. The next hour or so will be in the name of digital infrastructure and data. And with me, I have Hubert Tardieu, the CEO of GAIA-X, a very interesting project, which Altmaier has called one of the most ambitious digital projects of Europe for a long time. So Tardieu has been advising Atos and EVP in Atos for many, many years and have a long career in tech and must be said to be a really specialist in the area. Now he is the CEO of GAIA-X, this infrastructure and data space project. Welcome, Tardieu, to this session. I am most honored to have you at the studio with me today.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Cecilia. Very happy to be with you to explain what GAIA-X is.
Thank you. Yes, and maybe that is actually a very good start. So everybody's talking about GAIA-X. We know that we have a lot of countries, a lot of companies who are joining this association, but what is it about, and why at this time is this so important?
Okay, so GAIA-X was initially proposed by both the German and the French Minister of Economy, and it was inaugurated on the 4th of June 2020 by the 22 founding members, which were a mix of cloud service provider, users, association, and academic. Since 4th of June, we have been working very hard to create the environment for GAIA-X, and finally we have had the first step by creating an AISBL from Belgium law on the 15th of September, and we had the important GAIA-X summit, which took place 18th and 19th of November. Now, you are coming very timely in this interview, because next Monday, after having received the authorization from the Belgium government to proceed, we shall elect the first formal board for GAIA-X, which in between, during summer, is now strong of 200 members coming from all over the world, keeping the right balance between cloud service provider and user. So from now on, we are in the situation where we can deliver on the promises we have done.
Great, and so funding-wise, the structure is funded by the member of GAIA-X.
Exactly. So we have put together a scheme for fundings, and the resources of GAIA-X are coming from fees of the members. I would say the highest fees are paid by cloud service provider, but there is plenty of room for startup, plenty of room for non-governmental organization, which have a very little fee to pay to be part of this project, which is really open to a large community of users and providers.
Great, thank you so much. So I guess, the whole idea is to get more companies, more institutions using cloud. Why is Europe so late in adaptation of cloud? I think we have a slide showing basically the numbers that 26% of the EU companies are using cloud computing, and actually only 12% of our SMEs are using data in their services and products. So, why are we so late, and how do we set new targets?
Okay, and your question, Cecilia, is absolutely essential. Since this morning, we have been saying that we need to reinforce the digital content of Europe. And when we look at these figures of 26%, which is probably half of what it is in the United States, in Asia, but also half of what it is in the northern part of Europe, we do have an issue. We have analyzed the issue with the member of GAIA-X, and what we have seen is that the lack of portability of cloud in terms of infrastructure, in terms of application on data, was the first limitation why companies are not willing to go to cloud. They do not want to become prisoner of their cloud service provider. That is, I would say, the most easy thing to understand. More difficult to understand is the second reason why the cloud has not penetrated enough, is because of a lack of interoperability. What we mean by interoperability, if I take the example of the health sector, in GAIA-X, the company driving the health data space, and we will come back in a minute, is Philips. Philips is using extensively AWS, and if they need to share data with typically a company like Sanofi or an hospital in France, in Spain, which are using a different cloud service provider, the fact that each company has chosen a different cloud service provider shall not be an obstacle for interoperability. And basically, the first objective of GAIA-X is to identify what we have called policy rules in order to facilitate portability and interoperability in such a way that is reticency to adopt cloud find a solution which is accepted by all users, but which is also prepared jointly by users, by European cloud service provider, and obviously also by hyperscalers, which are representing today 70% plus of the offering of cloud.
Okay, thank you very much. I mean, as I told this morning also, Digital Europe has just launched. Actually, if you go to our website, you can see our KPIs for a stronger Digital Europe in 2025. And two of the targets are basically to reach 50% on adaptation and use of data of companies, and the other one is on cloud. So, I mean, how is GAIA-X linked to the data spaces and to the adoption of using more data for value creation in the economy?
Okay, before I answer to that question, so because you have mentioned this morning KPI, I would like to say that the KPI GAIA-X has given to ourselves is to double the percentage of cloud usage in the next 4 to 5 years, meaning to go to 50%, which is nothing which is unattainable, because this is already what exists in Finland, Sweden, and Denmark. Okay, so there is nothing impossible. It's simply that we need to find out ways to stop reticencies of the rest of Europe. Going back to your question, I have shown what are the obstacles for cloud to be more used, but the most important thing is what that was mentioned this morning by President Charles Michel, is the creation of data spaces. These data spaces have been really pushed in the European strategy for data as it has been presented on the 19th of February. The objective there is absolutely fundamental. It is to recognize that in the various ecosystems which are important in Europe, in health, in energy, in travel, in manufacturing, we do not have enough sharing of data. And this is a result of a systematic approach by purchasing and slicing the value chain. So we believe, and this is also the motto of the European Commission, that we need to facilitate, to enable the creation of data spaces. Before I enter a little bit further onto that, I would say if the data in health, in automotive, they are buried in a proprietary data center, the chances for these data spaces to be possible and the capability of sharing data is very difficult. So the move to cloud is the first step for data spaces to be made possible. Now, what is important in data spaces is the fact that sometimes there is a misunderstanding on data spaces, thinking that we are obliging everyone to put their data in a common data lake with a common data model. It is not like that. Data will stay where it is. There will be no unique data model. We will be able, especially thanks to the work which has been done by Industrial Data Space Association since 4 years, we are able to use the semantic connection between the various data collected by various partners to establish that data sharing while keeping the data where they are. Now, this is a technical aspect of it. This is also supported by interoperability. But the most important thing is that to create opportunities for ecosystem to get organized by themselves. And it has been the main task of GAIA-X since now 6 months to identify the companies willing to share their data and to organize them in such a way they can prepare a descriptive of what is their plan for the next years, where are the use cases which are really possible. And at this point, we are following 7 data spaces which have been presented during the GAIA-X Summit. And by the 31st of March, each of these data spaces will have presented a position paper explaining what are the use cases that they have selected and what are the partners willing to work together on those data spaces. And I would like to say that this kind of movement is extremely contagious, and we were very pleased to see, for instance, the creation of the Automotive Alliance beginning of December, where the main automotive manufacturer, but also equipment manufacturer, have decided to group their effort together in order to share data by explicitly referring to the way GAIA-X is building that kind of connection. So data spaces are really the big attractors for GAIA-X to be a success. The cloud penetration is a mean to an end, because the end is data sharing, which we believe is exactly the way to make industry in Europe more successful. We do not need anyone in the Silicon Valley or in China to get organized within our data spaces. And importantly to say, the data spaces will be presented by C-level executive board members, which will be showing how important is it at board level now to realize the benefit of data sharing.
Thank you so much. Maybe just to understand, so it's clearly that it's, and Anna, I think we can take the slide off the screen right now. This is a private sector initiative, and can you elaborate a little bit more on how you will work with the EU institutions, the national governments, and maybe also how is it linked to the European Alliance for Industrial Data and Cloud and Edge?
Okay, so this is something which is, while we speak, still in discussion. So the European Commission, Commissaire Breton, has launched mid-December the Alliance for European Alliance for Cloud and Data. It has been bringing together about 20 CEOs. It is today primarily concentrating on preparing an IPCEI, which is really a project which has the intention to create the next generation of cloud, especially recognizing the importance of edge cloud, and also which will be done by industrial players willing to work together in consortia. Just to say that, I would say, Cecilia, that the job of GAIA-X is to prepare the overall architecture for APCI. It is to prepare within the policy rules which are requested by the financial sector, by the health sector, what are the policy rules they want, and to prototype in open system all these policy rules and all the federated services in such a way that when the consortium is beginning to think about an industrial implementation of these rules, they have already a common ground on which they want to work. So most of the companies which have been invited by the European Commission are already member of GAIA-X, and therefore GAIA-X is a place where these consortium are formed and where we are preparing bids which will be probably requested by mid-2021 or autumn 2021. So that is very clear for that. We are also discussing the way we want to articulate the policy rule of GAIA-X and the European Cloud Rule Book. Okay, it's clear that we will be very much close to the users to identify the rules they need, and we will therefore provide that to the European Commission.
Okay, thank you so much. It sounds like it's really kind of we've been advocating for more agile digital policy making, right? That we need to test and shape the regulation. In the process of defining the regulation, we need to test it. And this seems like a great opportunity of actually doing that agile, iterative process. So actually 9 GAIA-X national hubs has been established. And as you know, you are also speaking to 40 associations in Digital Europe today in all the European countries. I mean, how can they join? Can associations join? Will there be hubs in all countries? Can new companies join again, and when and how?
Yeah, exactly. So I would say there are basically at this point, the way we think we will increase the number of our members is not from the cloud service provider side, because we have all of them or almost all of them over the world. It is primarily from users that we are expecting to have many more companies which will be helping the data space to be created. But this is also a call for startups and associations to join GAIA-X to bring their unique value in some of the technology which we need, especially in edge cloud, in security. And the deal is very simple. We are helping them to have access to very large cloud service provider or user, facilitating therefore their penetration on the market. So that is for one thing. I have to say that we have reopened the application to GAIA-X, so anyone who is willing to join can do it through the specific mail that you will find on internet. As well, we are pursuing in a systematic way the creation of new national hubs. As you said, already several of them are there, but the intention is to have, if not 27 national hubs, but probably 23, 25 by the end of the year. And at this point of time, we have connection with most of European countries to create those national hubs for GAIA-X.
Yes, and it's here we actually see the status as at the current time, right?
Exactly. But you do not see here things on which we are very attached for plenty of reasons. As you know, UK finally is continuing with the Horizon program, and therefore, if UK, which is the case, is asking to create a UK hub, we will proceed because we believe UK can bring us a lot. As well, we have seen a lot of interest in Asia, Japan, Korea, China, to create a hub in Asia Pac, which also we will follow.
Interesting. So I would say there's plenty, as I hear from you, there's plenty of possibility to join, both for what you call the users, which are, sector companies within other sectors that are willing to set up use cases on data spaces, for example, and work within GAIA-X for that, but also for associations who are willing to onboard, for example, the members, as associations who can help to set up this hub for SMEs and further a broader set of companies.
One of them, Cecilia, being Digital Europe, which has joined us since some time.
Yes, exactly. We were one of the first joiners, of course, and very happy to be a part of actually shaping this new GAIA-X association. So we will be turning to a few questions from the audience. We have a few minutes left, so I will take one from Giacomo Pizza, which is the question is, how is GAIA-X going to play a role in the Commission's data strategy, and what are the differences between GAIA-X and the European Alliance of Industrial Data and Cloud?
Excellent question. So as I mentioned, as far as we understand, the European Alliance for Data and Cloud is primarily targeting the investment in technology which are necessary to prepare the next generation of cloud, which is more edge cloud, which is more secure, and so on and so forth. From what we understand as well, the European Alliance for Data and Cloud is not covering the data space domain, which will remain part of the Horizon program and Digital Europe program. And we believe that GAIA-X can be the voice of industry to put together this data space content and this infrastructure content. One of the very interesting findings of the last 6 months is that finance, health are asking for policy rules which are not only at the application and data level, but which have also impact on the infrastructure level, typically on localization and so on. So some policy rule will be domain dependent, and if you do not have those two aspects together in the organization, you will be missing that opportunity.
Thank you so much. We'll take one more question. It's Tony Graziano, and he is asking, how will GAIA-X be able to provide its services at a speed and in a quality that it creates real benefit for the customers in Europe?
Can you repeat, because I do not get it completely? So
I think this is about the speed. So this is about how will GAIA-X be able to provide its services at a speed and in a quality that creates real benefit for the customers in Europe?
Okay, so thank you very much for that question. Everything we have said with now 25 minutes is linked to this impression that we do not have much time to find the way. So in other words, anything which is a conventional standardization where you try to convince people to come and then it takes 5 years to agree and then 5 years to make it known is not appropriate for what we want to do. So in effect, we are working on an architecture of standards and policy rules. The first round of them, after being reviewed by cloud service provider, will be available at the beginning of Q2. And the first services which are in line with the architecture of standard will be available at the end of Q3. So we are absolutely conscious of time. Some good advisors coming from analysts have said, if you miss the opportunity of the summer, there is no need for GAIA-X. We do not believe this is that pathetic, but we know that if we do not deliver visible and tangible results by the end of 2021, the momentum we have created may disappear. So you can be sure this is an essential element of our strategy.
Thank you so much. So first of all, I would like to thank you for a very open and transparent discussion, and for also having visions on adaptation of cloud and data, and we're happy to be a part of the GAIA-X. I know that you're also very open to actually taking calls from members who are interested in knowing more on GAIA-X. We had the first several calls before we joined with myself and yourself, and I urge the listeners to tap into the meetings and actually listen in on the GAIA-X story. Thank you so much for being here. It was an honor. And before we slide right into the data panel and the data spaces, we will take a short break. Be with you in a few minutes. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Bye.
Okay, thank you so much, everyone, and welcome back. We were transforming right from discussing GAIA-X and the creation of data spaces to this great panel. And I think I can say we have representatives from the Commission, from SMEs, from organizations, from the European Parliament, and of course from HP, company that is greatly also engaged in data. Welcome to Christiane Cannonbly from the European Commission, to Gilles Thibault from HPE, to Andreas Kleve from Corti, and to Bart Stukas-Agoria, and to Leisha Scheinenmacher. I hope that I pronounced that partly correct. Excuse me if I don't. From the European Parliament, MEP from the European Parliament. So I think we can say that this year will maybe be the year of data. And you all approach this from very different angles, but hopefully with the same goal. In Digital Europe, we have created 3 relevant goals, maybe more than that, but at least 3 I will mention here. One is that the adaptation of SMEs and using data for their products and services should not be 12%, but actually 50%. That we need to create not 12, actually only 5 within the EU percent of the world's unicorn, but 25% of the world's unicorn, fast-growing, innovative tech companies, database tech companies in Europe within 2025, and that we would like to see the data economy grow from 3 to 6% of the economy. And now this panel needs to tell us the how. So let's first start with a few questions for you, Christiane. I think the European Commission is right now, you could say, taking quite a global lead on data privacy, on data in general. And even though some might argue that we missed the train on the data, on the consumer business, I'm not sure that we have an industry. And we created this great European data strategy. What's in that strategy and what's the core of it?
Thanks a lot, Cecilia, and good afternoon to everyone. Thanks a lot for being here. It's great to have this discussion. I mean, honestly, on data, I fully agree with you. It will be an interesting year ahead. What we do here, we came last year, as you know, from we started with our data strategy, which I would like to put very briefly also into the bigger picture of the digital strategy, because data is one part of what we're doing here. And I think we cannot discuss the one in isolation from the other. In the digital strategy, we always said it very clearly. What we want to achieve here is really to develop technology with a purpose, and technology where people can trust in and where there's a societal benefit. And that is also something which we had, of course, in the data strategy. I mean, we all know the enormous amount of data we're having, that this is ever increasing, that we want to reap the benefits out of it, really drive here the innovation potential and the innovation capacity in Europe, which is there. We have enormous amounts of data which are never used, not even reused. And we really want that this will work, that all the various industries, the businesses, etc., can use it, but in a way that it really also helps our society at large, be it via better public services, be it via the better traffic organizations, etc. So there are various possibilities to go about it. How do we want to do it? In the data strategy, we sort of identified the areas where we might want to look a little bit further on into that today. The one part was really to say we need the trust of the people. Data-driven innovations will only be embraced by our citizens if they can trust them, if they are aware that there's something really working. So we need to be sure that we stay in control. People need to be reassured that they stay in control of their data, but also businesses need to be reassured that there is something where they stay in control of their data. Second element is surely we need to look at the governance structure in order to facilitate really the data sharing. That we have here something where it's clear who has an access right to my data, who holds the data, and what are the rules also for that, so that we have a clear legal framework in place so that people can be certain once they share the data that this is not misused. Again, a combination of trust, but also the element of the real governance part. And the other thing which we shouldn't forget is really, you just discussed GAIA-X, but also in other ways, we really need to have the relevant investments in the data infrastructure. And that is not just cloud, it's also overall the data infrastructure. It's also into the data spaces. We also need the computing power to make use of the data we're having. And of course, as we have here the green and digital transition coming along together, we need to do this in an energy efficient way. So there are many, many elements where we're looking at and where we proposed in the data strategy on how we would like to go about it. But maybe this as a quick overview, what are the driving forces, again, really to reap the benefits, to drive the innovation, to allow everyone in Europe, medium-sized, small businesses and enterprises, all the bigger ones, really to make use of the data economy and what it brings.
I think that's refreshing to actually hear. It's not only about regulation, but it is also about investment and enhancing the potential of digital in Europe. So I will turn to you, Gilles, and I will ask you. I mean, you're a very important player also in this data economy. I mean, what do you think is the state of the data economy in Europe, and what is working for businesses and what is not working for businesses at the moment in Europe?
Yeah, thank you, Cecilia. And first thing I'd like to say, I'm not sure if the 2021 is going to be the year of data or the data economy in Europe, but it's going to be a very important year. That's for sure. I want to acknowledge what Christiane just said about the digital strategy of the European Commission as well, and some of the legislation that is going to be taken. It's not about all, it's not only about legislation, but it's really important. And I think what the European Commission is trying to do here is not only solving maybe some of the perceived issues we've got today in the market, but it's very forward-looking, right, to your point as well, Cecilia. And that vision of building kind of a single European data market in the same way we did it for citizens or goods or services is going to be really foundational, I think, for the business. It's really about building a foundation on which business are going to be able to thrive. And obviously, I think never waste a good crisis, and the recovery funds and the 20% are going to need to spend on digital can have a massive impact on closing the gap we've got in Europe with other continents. That being said, I think it's still early days. You mentioned, right? I think some of the KPIs that Digital Europe has set for the digital economy, I think it's still pretty low compared to the potential. I think HP, we are, a digital infrastructure provider. We present basically in all customer segments in the B2B space. So that gives us, I think, a good view on what is happening in the market, being present in Europe for more than 80 years. And what I've seen right now, everybody's talking about the data explosion, obviously, which has been going on for many years, if we fair. It's just a shift in the market. It was interesting to listen to Mr. Michel this morning talking about industrial data and edge computing, because basically that's the big shift we've got in the market today. We going from a world where the explosion of the data creation was mainly personal data to a world where it's actually more coming from industries and enterprises. With another big shift, which is really important in this discussion, is that the data that enterprises collect are not coming anymore from the data center of a public cloud. They're coming from what's called the edge, right? It's coming from connected devices, digital services, their plant, their factories. So that's a big shift, right? So we're seeing great progress, and I think Bart with Agoria as well as some interesting stats about Belgium. We're seeing great progress in terms of how enterprises are collecting data. The problem right now for enterprise, how to use that data, quite frankly. We've got 80%, on average, 80% of the data in enterprise is not being used at all or at its full capacity. So that's a problem, right? So I think because we talk about very sophisticated model of data exchanges, etc. But I think the first priority is using your data, in your own in your enterprise, and I think you see a difference between large and small companies, if I may say so. If you look at financial services, I think the supply chain has always been an IT supply chain. They used to work with data exchange has always been at the core of the industry. So they're probably more advanced in the vision how or that single data market will play for them. I think my big concern is the SMB space, which is the backbone of the European economy. It's 95% of the enterprise are less than 250 employees. And you mentioned it, Cecilia, the penetration of analytical tools in these companies is actually very, very low. And that brings me to the main concern I've got for me, and there are many inhibitors. One of the main inhibitors we've got is digital skills. I think that was discussed this morning, but I think that's one of the biggest problems we've got in Europe right now. Last year, I think we had more than 750,000 IT jobs that were not filled in Europe. That's a massive problem. Without even taking into account a lot of the current jobs, we need some kind of form of reskilling right now. So we have to accelerate. It's great to see that part of the 20% of recovery fund will be spent on education. That being said, and being a father as well, of children still being at school, there's a lot to be done here in terms of digitalization of schools, right? And also giving some more digital acumen in the teacher community, universities and secondary schools. I think that's needed. On the other hand, I think looking positively at things as well, digital tools and the acceleration that happens over the last few months and quarters give us an opportunity to scale the efforts, the educational efforts that we should do. So Cecilia, that's a little bit the way I'm looking at the situation of data economy in Europe right now.
And I'm sure also on the SME, I mean, just before I will speak to Leisha, but afterwards on Andreas and Bart, we will have an insight into what is the SME situation. So thank you so much, Leisha, for joining us. And you are a part of the IDA committee, and you've been tasked by the Commission to also look at the AI paper, the data strategy, maybe also the DSA and other pieces of legislation, and shape an opinion on how to go about that. Can you download us a little bit what your work is and how you would continue with that?
Thank you, Cecilia. And I think that today's discussion really shows the enormous potential of AI and data, and that is something that we acknowledge also in the AIDA committee. And if it's on fighting climate change or social equality or global pandemics, but it also shows that it's a technology under construction and it is still in its developing phase, and there are still several steps to take to reach its full potential. And as you are aware, there's no AI without data, and any solution brought by AI is as trustworthy as its underlying data set. And we have made some important steps in data regulation, such as the GDPR, but we do not have the infrastructure yet to support the exponential growth of data and AI. We see great initiatives popping up. And in the Netherlands, for example, we have a public-private partnership between Philips Healthcare, the Technical University of Eindhoven, and 3 top clinical hospitals. However, each of the 100 researchers that are now doing research there, active in this private partnership, need over a year to jump through all the legal hoops to use the data. So I think this is really a shame, and we should really support these field labs. And secondly, Jill also talked about this, the SMEs. I think they should really not be left behind in these developments. It is really troubling to see that SMEs do not see the potential of AI, or just simply don't know how to use the data that they have now in order to help their businesses. And so I think AI and data literacy is for SMEs is something that we really have to work on. And of course, as Christian also mentioned, I believe the trust. We have to keep our citizens in mind when we are talking about data. and developments in technology can only work if there is trust. And we see a lack of trust due to the fact that citizens feel that when they enter their data somewhere in a system, they do not have control over it, and they don't know where that data goes, if the data is sold or shared with third parties. And obviously, this is something that is already done by the GDPR, but we also have to look at enforcement of these rules. And finally, when we speak about AI, we have to remember that this is a digital market, but this digital market is a global market. So we always have to emphasize to align and collaborate with like-minded democratic countries. And this is also something that AIDA focuses on, as a form of digital diplomacy with countries, like-minded countries such as the US, but also Canada, Japan, Australia. We have to look further also to be able to set global standards. So I think in conclusion, the AIDA committee should focus on the possibilities that AI brings and data. And you mentioned, Cecilia, investment. Yes, very much so. And that has to go hand in hand with clear rules for both citizens and companies so they know what they are dealing with. So that would be my introductory remarks. Thank you.
Thank you so much, and thank you for also the global outside. It is definitely a vision that we share. So jumping right back to ground again, to Bart, who is the CEO of Agoria, one of our biggest membership organizations from Belgium, and also Bart is kind of my boss because he's at my board. So thank you for being here today, Bart. I mean, in Belgium, you're one of the countries that are quite far on data strategy. And I know that Agoria has been driving a lot of input to the data strategy. What is the status for data usage in Belgium? And what is the strategy for advancing it?
Okay, hello, Cecilia. That was the nicest introduction I've had since long. Thank you for that. Hello, everyone. A few things I want to say. First, perhaps around the Belgian data strategy. We tend to look into 4 challenges with the Belgian government. The first one is, what do we need to do to make sure that there are enough companies, especially SMEs, that are building applications, leveraging data, and taking value out of this data? Second, and I think, Gilles, you mentioned it already, I shared it with you, people. There is absolutely, it's a big component of the strategies, making sure we address that expertise need that currently we are in big shortage of. Third, provide an infrastructure. Here comes GAIA-X also into play, but I have an interesting example. And fourth, obviously, providing the trust to people, to companies, to make sure that they can handle all this with trust. Now, the Flemish government, Flanders, as you know, is the northern region of Belgium. They have initiated a pretty interesting initiative here. They want to create a data utility company. In fact, in comparison with a water utility, they think data needs to flow like water. And when you look into a public utility like water, you want to be sure that when you need water, you can have access to it. You don't need to think what infrastructure to use because it's always there. You trust the water is clean and it's respecting the appropriate standards. And 4, you know how much to pay for it. The more you use, you pay, and you know the price. Now, in parallel with that, Flemish government wants to create a company just to do this for data. They will start as a public-private partnership, but the objective is, as the company grows into maturity, that it becomes a fully 100% private initiative. Obviously, they will provide data vaults as well, so that there is enough trust that you can keep control on your data. So I thought I was pretty much in line with also some of the priorities of GAIA-X. And so the Belgian government also, together with us at Agoria, decided to join GAIA-X. We have our own GAIA-X for Belgium initiative that we are doing with a different level of government in Belgium. And in fact, if you look at it, what are our priorities there? We think, in fact, that we are the perfect match for GAIA-X. First of all, we don't want to fall from one dependency into another. So we don't want to fall from a Chinese-US dependency into a Franco-German dependency, with apologies to the colleagues from France and Germany. But also, more importantly, as a country, I think we're the perfect match. If you look to our structure, our government structure, we have many layers of government, but they all need to share data. They all need to serve the same citizens, the same companies. So that sharing of data is super essential here. So if we can make it happen, it can happen everywhere, I'm pretty sure. Also, we're a small country with a lot of SMEs. And so if we find a way of making our SMEs leveraging this initiative, providing input to this initiative, then we can make it work as well. Very much export-oriented as well. So doing export, yeah, it's clear that you need to be able to share data everywhere. I think you had an earlier discussion with the ambassador, the EU ambassador for the US. You spoke about the sharing of data between US and Europe, and that's absolutely true for many of the SMEs as well. And last but not least, in Belgium, we're the heart of Europe. We have it in our genes to collaborate and to be inspired by European initiatives. So we just want to lead the way, because it's also a big economic opportunity here. We made some measurement, and we think the Belgium data economy is already worth 13 billion euro. It's more than 3% of the GDP, and we absolutely want to lead and take a benefit of it as quickly as possible. So I'm going to pause here, Cecilia, and give it back to you.
Thank you so much, Bart. Just before I introduce you and your question, Andreas, I want to elaborate on a report that we just launched, and happy to share it with all of you. We actually asked, 4 years ago, we started this Digital Europe Unicorn Award for the most innovative tech scale-ups, so proven scale-ups in Europe. And Andreas's company, Corti, won the prize last year. And we asked these 60 unicorns, future unicorns, what are the areas that you should invest in? And they answered data spaces and education, which is it seems like a no-brainer, but it seems like something that we have also been discussing. So let's hope that the member states and the Commission will walk the talk in the recovery plans. On the biggest barriers, they answered the fragmentation and the lack of fitness of the regulatory environment of the internal market. That's a tougher one, but I think this is one of the main problems that we should address in the year of data. How do we actually implement, not only reinvent or invent new rules? So turning to you, Andreas, talking about untapped potential of artificial intelligence. Is there an untapped potential in Europe? And what is that untapped potential if it's there?
There's a massive untapped potential. And I would even go so far as to say it's unimaginably big. And I can say that because the majority of solutions we're solving with the likes of artificial intelligence was problems that were deemed unsolvable just decades ago. So I am very, very sure the next generation of entrepreneurs will come up with solutions that we might not even be able to comprehend at this point. So I do think there is a vast potential. Artificial intelligence, as we've just heard, is dependent on data. There was a very good point just made about that, but I think we need to make a very important distinction here. And that is, if we think of data as the infrastructure for SMEs to go and build innovative solutions, which I guess I'm hearing on all of us should be a part of the solution, then we need to acknowledge that SMEs are either very small or very young, and they might even be both. That means they do not have any data. So inherently, we need to acknowledge that data-intense business models favor the big. They favor economies of scale. An SME cannot just wake up in the morning and have magically meaningful data and magically build innovations. And given that that's the case, and even worse, that the majority of data that's available is a minute, small part of what is about to be created. So the total mass of data ever created has a doubling time of 2 years. That means in 2 years, the total amount of data ever created will be doubled. And that will be doubled on platforms owned primarily by governments or big organizations, not startups, because many of them won't even exist. So if we want SMEs to go and build more innovation and spearhead that, we just need to acknowledge that one thing is, of course, upskilling so we can have more innovation. I agree on that 100%. But if we want it to happen faster than that, then we need somebody to take a risk on applying and offering data. And the only organizations that can do that is large organizations that have economic motive to do it themselves, or governments. So if we in Europe want SMEs to go and innovate on data, we need to reward governments, operators, and practitioners with investments and resources if they're bold enough to pick SMEs. And I think that's a discussion that is easily overlooked, because it's always easy to agree that upskilling and more investments will be good. But inherently, we're talking about creating a market where we want to favor a certain subset of the market that are just intrinsically not able to compete unless we make an infrastructure for them to do so. So I think this incredibly big potential that is tappable by the likes of artificial intelligence needs a revival in seriosity if we talk about short-term potentials.
I mean, seeing that the backbone of the economy is 99% SMEs, I think we had a quite clear point there that scale matters, and right now it's quite hard for the SMEs actually to get the amount of data that they need to lead. And I remember a few stories from last year that going from hospital to hospital to government and having to hire like 60 lawyers just to find your way through rules and regulation not implemented in the same way. So I think we have some challenges, but challenges are good. Then we will all have something to do for the next 10 years and to work with. So maybe just turning to a poll. We are looking at what are the main barriers for data sharing and reuse. Let's try to ask the audience and to see, if that is a fragmented market, is it interoperability, is it availability of high quality data, lack of in-house expertise, legal uncertainty, or pricing and unfair conditions. So can we have the poll results? I don't know how long should we give to do that? Let me see, a few minutes. Okay. And then while we see what the major barriers are, maybe I will turn back to you, Christiane. So Christiane, now you recently adopted the Data Governance Act, and you will have out a proposal on AI soon. I mean, how are these initiatives linked, and what do you think this will impose even another set of rules that SMEs will have to adapt to, and how will you make that smooth? How this time? I mean, GDPR wasn't easy. It was fantastic, but it was not easy for businesses, and definitely not for SMEs, and still isn't. So how do we avoid that? How do we get into kind of where it works, hitting ground?
Thanks, Cecilia. And also thanks for this good discussion. I think that the SME point is a very important one, and we're very conscious about that in our work here. You mentioned AI, you mentioned the Data Governance Act. I mean, we have a lot at the moment happening here. Maybe I start with the Governance Act first and then put this into perspective. What we try to do with the Governance Act is really to have here an element where we say we need to share more data, especially to make it available to everybody. And we have various aspects in that piece of legislation which we proposed in November. I want to zoom in here on two elements which are, I think, of importance here. The one part is that in the Data Governance Act, what we propose is a possibility also for the public sector, not the private sector, the public sector to share data which they normally wouldn't share. And to make this available to others who might have an interest, to data intermediaries for research purposes, etc., so that also smaller and medium-sized enterprises can have access to a set of data which is at the moment hardly ever touched. It doesn't oblige the public sector to share, but it gives for the first time the possibility to share this data. This is quite some groundbreaking stuff, which is unprecedented worldwide. And I think we have to acknowledge that here quite a step was made. The other part which we have in the Data Governance Act is also coming back to how does this market work? How do we look at SMEs, etc.? What we propose in the Data Governance Act as well is the creation of trusted data intermediaries. So an organization, data intermediaries, to organize the pooling of the data and to make sure that the right people have access to the data, and also how the data is shared, and that on a non-profit basis, which really creates the trust also to share more data, because okay, this data will be shared in a useful way. I can still control how it's shared, etc. These are elements which create a governance framework, which hopefully then can also be taken up later on for some of the data spaces. Next point, which you said, yes, we want to create these data spaces, but first of all, we also need the Data Act to get some of the basic elements and the legal certainty rights, which is also one of the key elements and the stumbling block that at the moment for many of the data sharing elements, we have no legal certainty. And for that, we need a clear-cut regulation. Coming to AI, I mean, again, we had the white paper in February. I think nobody will be completely surprised with what is coming, but I would like here to focus on two elements. In the white paper, we made it very clear, artificial intelligence is really the future, and I cannot agree more with what Andreas just said about the untapped potential. This has enormous potential to come, to bring to our society, and it will be used, but we need to make sure that the data we use and how it's used is trustworthy. What we will do in the artificial intelligence framework, which will come this year, is really to create here basic requirements, but that for high-risk artificial intelligence applications. It doesn't mean that the music stream artificial intelligence, etc. Well, I might get the wrong music here or the wrong song, which I don't really want to listen to, but so be it. The data might have not been great, or the algorithm hasn't been trained properly. No harm done. But if I use an AI application in order to get a very targeted, personalized cancer treatment, we need to be sure that this is correct and there are no flaws in how this AI is used. The same if we use AI for recruitment purposes, we need to be sure that the data which was used for this AI application has no bias, or we violate your fundamental rights. And these are the elements which we want to put down here in the framework, very conscious that we still want to drive the innovation. So the framework will really focus on the high-risk AI applications. And at the same time, and I always want to stress this, at the same time, we will still continue our artificial intelligence, sort of this ecosystem of excellence. So it's not just about regulating AI. At the same time, the European Commission, together with member states and others, is really advancing quite a lot on investment support, research support. We have the coordinated plan on artificial intelligence, which will be updated again also this year, so that we really advance here, that we take also smaller and medium-sized enterprises with us. And in addition, very important that we link here really research and the research done in the private sector in order to advance on AI in a European way.
Thank you so much, Christiane. And we heard just before from Mr. Tardieu that GAIA-X the idea with GAIA-X is really to have like an agile, I wouldn't say sandbox, but agile policy-making test cradle for new regulation and also for existing regulation on tech, which is quite interesting, I believe, for the Commission also, that it can actually have an iterative process with the industry to see if it works and how it works and what the needs of harmonization across countries are, etc. So maybe turning to you again, Gilles. I mean, GAIA-X, very important initiative in Europe. What is your expectation of GAIA-X, and what are the KPIs that you would like to see and success factors that you would like to see driving it?
Yeah, thank you for the question, Cecilia. Maybe two things. First, to start, fully agree. Firstly, the first comment with Andreas' comment on the SMB, the challenge we've got the SMB. I think the challenge is nevertheless broader than just data and AI. It's also about digitalization, basic digitalization of SMB. I think that's where we are in many aspects. And then with regard to GAIA-X, I think, Bart, I'm Belgium as well, and fully agree with your statement. If we can make it work in Belgium, we'll make it work everywhere. I think so. So I think we are a proud member of GAIA-X. I think it's a great initiative. It's ambitious. We really like the fact that it's, it's an ecosystem-driven initiative, driven private, public sector, universities as well. So that makes it really interesting. And we've representative for all the different, member states as well. We think it can be a game changer. Although we're seeing a big mountain behind Mr. Tardieu when he's making his, his interview, and I think we've got a big mountain to climb, I believe, to get to the top. I think GAIA-X, the vision of GAIA-X, if you think about it, it's not really new in the European, European Union. I think the European Commission started 10 years ago with a project called Contrail. I don't know if some of you remember, which was really about creating kind of federation of decentralized cloud infrastructure, which was kind of very innovative at the time, if you think about it 10 years ago. So we've been building as HPE on it. We built a community which is called Cloud 28 Plus, and which is really about building an ecosystem of cloud providers. We've got 1,200 cloud providers or service providers across the world participating and publishing services, 90,000 services. The reason why we're excited about GAIA-X is because it's gone further. It's gone further than that and really focusing on interoperability and portability of data, which I think are indeed two of the inhibitors we've got today for the cloud adoption in Europe. And we can see it varies a lot. I think still in northern country that I'm responsible for at HPE, I can see a big adoption of cloud, but obviously in some other part of Europe that's very very different. I think that the challenge for me, two challenges, right? I think we're seeing indeed in the automotive industry we just mentioned, or in the financial service industry, we're seeing big players, right, getting together, putting the standard in place, and that's the way it is to drive some market impact. I'm indeed worried about the impact on the SMB space at the end, so we need to make sure that they do participate in a way or another. And then the other point is the ecosystem, right? Is the ecosystem of cloud service, European cloud service providers. We're doing at HPE 70% of our business through partners, so it's a community we know very well. The reality today is that less than 20% of the cloud services being consumed in Europe are cloud services from local service provider. So I believe that the GAIA-X initiative is a potential as well by creating the necessary standard and by creating the kind of collaboration we need to, or should I say, to help this community, which is really important for Europe to thrive in the future.
Lash, it's turning to you, and then right after we have the poll results. So will the committee also actually be discussing how to drive data availability within the member states? Is that within the mandate of the group? Will you kind of push the governments to make more data availability, to really push to boost the data economy? Is that also within the mandate of the group?
I think within the committee, we have our mandate is merely how do we incorporate AI in moving forward as Europe? How do we make sure that we get into all this untapped potential, and also seeing where legislation is needed? Because in fact, when we look at AI and data, AI has been largely regulated. We have different laws such as fundamental rights law, product liability directive, GDPR. So we are also looking into where are the gaps in the legislation and where do these gaps need to be filled. Also to not put a whole new regulatory framework for the market to deal with. So that is something that we are looking into. Obviously, we want to cooperate with member states. Just last week, I had a meeting with some of the Dutch members of the Dutch Parliament in order to see how we can work together on moving forward. Because if we do it in splendid isolation only in Brussels, we will have a hard time implementing it in the member states. So I feel that it should be, and it is a priority in AIDA to also look at what the member states are doing.
Let's look at the poll results. So we think, will we have that on the screen also? Yeah, so I think definitely interoperability and transfer mechanism is the biggest barrier. Second came legal uncertainty, red tape, and after that, basically an equal distribution of the rest of them. So definitely one of the biggest barriers for data sharing is interoperability and transfer mechanism and legal uncertainty and red tape. Very interesting. So maybe just passing to Bart. I mean, is that something that you struggle with, that you hear your members struggle with on legal uncertainty and interoperability and transfer mechanisms?
Certainly, Cecilia. And that's also why an initiative as the one that I mentioned, like that public data company initiative, is so important, because it sets the way you can address it. But in fact, I was surprised there was no. There is one other inhibitor that I see, and that in fact that I joined Christian in what she said about public institutions, because one of the inhibitors that I see is fear. It's a defensive approach to share data, because we always say data is a new gold. That's true to a certain way. It's what you take out of the data, the value you create out of the data, that I believe is more the real gold. But having said that, if I look to my own country, and if I look to the difficulties between saying publicly, we're going to share data between public companies, and the reality, that is still work in progress. I'll give you a concrete example. If you take the example of mobility, it's for sure that concepts as mobility as a service, working through different modes of transport to get you from A to B, is a very good thing to do. It's good for me as a citizen. It's good for the environment as well, because it's good for most of the companies. You can adapt your travel to the most fitted moment. But if I see how difficult it still is to share data between private companies, public transport companies, other companies that can parking institutions and whatever, there is still a lot of work to do. And so that's why I'm also so really passionate about these data spaces, because I hope they can provide us the example on how to do. Because if you would ask me, what are the domains where we need to invest in, I would always say take manufacturing, take mobility, take health. But I would now also say public. Public institutions can give the example here and take all the inhibitors away, because there is a lot they control, and they can show the example. And so I would do a plea to invest even more in that, to my colleagues from all the Commission, but also from my own government institutions in Belgium.
Super interesting, and we'll return to the data spaces in a second, remembering that this is actually one of the main needs and requests from SMEs to invest in the data spaces as a driver of recovery. So maybe the last question for you, Andreas, before we turn also to a few from the audience. So, I mean, for Corti, what are your needs? What is it? What kind of data do you need? Is it public? Is it private? And you know, how to make it available for you? How can we make it easier on you?
Yes. So what kind of data do we need at Corti? And of course, we're just one small startup, and Corti is in the business of transporting knowledge between accidents. And that sounds grave and serious, but that's also what we try to do. So imagine that your loved ones is in an accident. Corti's promise is that we will make it better and easier for the caregiver or healthcare professional to make the right decision faster. And that we do by having listened in on millions of accidents. And there we've learned what to say, what to do, and what's important. And the beautiful thing about a computer is that it has infinite memory, it never forgets, it doesn't need coffee. And that kind of data that we can instantly store and make available for the real heroes, the caregivers that are with us during an emergency, will allow them to make just a tad bit fewer human mistakes. And if you scale that up over hundreds of thousands of accidents across a continent like Europe, that's thousands of lives saved each year. But for us to do that, we don't need CPR numbers. We don't want to sell data. We don't even want to own the data. Remember, I am a patient too, and I don't want Cordy to own my data. We just want to listen, deeply listen to patients talking about symptoms. And what we will learn is just, what does a really bad cough sound like? Sounds worse than a less severe cough. But for an individual human, that's incompatible, because ultimately we can't remember anything. We're just human. So this kind of technology is this big second brain that a really, really good expert can use in a dire moment. But that's really hard to be allowed to do so, because instantly, as I think Bart put it very nicely, and I support so much of what you're doing, Christian, and I think you're absolutely right. We need to make meaningful solutions, and we need to make sure that we protect the citizens while doing it, so we can create trust. But trust also needs the test of time, and it needs the test of actual practice. And for us to practice this ability to give superpowers, we need to try. We need to be able to do so. And that's the hard part, right? Because ultimately, why would you trust the SME with listening on millions of patients? We have to prove that. And that hurdle is incredibly big to cross as a company with zero operational history. I'd much rather go to BART and HP or Google or Microsoft or whatever, because they at least are perceivably big enough to do such a thing. So for a company like Cordy, the task to get there is incredibly long. And we don't want special practice. We don't want special terms. We just want equal terms to what bigger companies get. And we want an ability at least to prove that we can be more innovative, and we will take more risks to the benefit of the patient. And that is incredibly hard, not just for us, but for many other SMEs.
Thank you so much. And I believe, we actually have now 60 of these tech innovators in Europe to listen to, and we learn a lot from you. So thank you so much, Andreas. So then we have a few questions from the audience. And before I pose these questions, I want to launch the next poll, which is what are the priorities on investment on the data spaces? So which databases should we actually invest in first? It's going to be hard because everybody has an opinion, but let's see. Let's poll. We have 2,500 people online, and let's see what is the general opinion from those on where should we actually invest. So I see that I have 5 minutes left, so I only have one question and the poll results of this great panel. So one thing is is there funding foreseen to open up these data spaces and offer them to market for commercial and non-commercial use? Is Jan Viljas who is asking. So I guess that is for you, Christiane, maybe. And maybe others would like to comment afterwards.
I can already say that I'm very happy that I don't have to contribute to the poll right now, which of the data spaces is the most important one, which would be difficult to answer, I think. No, on the data spaces, let's be honest, we will have these data spaces are desperately needed. And I think with the Data Governance Act, we put a good basic framework in by introducing the possibility of creating these data intermediaries, which sets a very clear and trusted way of pooling data, of facilitating the data sharing. That said, various of these data spaces will have different needs. And we have to be clear, there's not one single set of how a data space works. A health data space, Andreas just said it, there are many, many elements in there which are highly interesting, but where we need to be sure, of course, that privacy issues are well respected, that here really the access to this data is limited really to those with a clear identification of what they're dealing with, that they're not reusing this data in a different way, etc. That might be completely different in another data space. On agriculture, I can easily see many, many things highly interesting and as valuable, but with a completely different focus on how this data space needs to be set up. So the governance and how it works, that is really something where we will need to see data space by data space, how exactly it works. But the interesting part I see here is really that, of course, I mean, on data interoperability, how to use it, standardization of data, etc. I mean, there's an awful lot to be done and an awful lot of investment needed. We haven't really touched upon that whole part here. Maybe just to briefly mention, we have, of course, I mean, the recovery and resilience plans coming, but that is very much still in, I mean, we are trying here to enforce also and to promote really these cross-border projects, especially the digital projects, also to really foster here on and promote skills investments. I mean, this was one of the things also mentioned earlier on, where there is a lot we can do. But it is also there very much up, of course, to the member states to see what exactly are their needs. We have other programs, of course, to help and facilitate to set up these infrastructures which we need, like the Digital Europe program. We have the Connecting Europe program. I mean, there are funding possibilities and also via Horizon where we surely see how we can bring this forward. But for that, I think for that whole discussion, we might need a different panel once more.
And sorry, go ahead. Sorry, it was a perfect transition to the investments, and just maybe rounding off like I started. We have 10 pan-European projects described. One of them is making data available and making sure that it's available on equal terms for everybody in market. Another one is, of course, boosting the skills across the member states. Like Gilles also said here, without the skills, great things are unlikely to happen in the digital space. Thank you so much. Before you go, I would like to see if we have the poll coming up and the results on which one. And I can tell you here, so for sure the two winners are the Green Deal data space, so saving the planet, and the health data space. So I would say congratulations to the Commission. Somehow it is the three pillars of your strategy is the health, and it's the green, and it's the digital, which is coming out very strongly here. Manufacturing is also very strong, 17%. So it seems that there is a great need to actually do this, and at least here you have a bit of polling. I think I had Bart just saying I want the last word, and if you do that very shortly, you can have it.
No, absolutely. I just wanted to make the link between SMEs and manufacturing. I think if we want to make sure that SMEs, and I'm not talking about startups here, but that the traditional SMEs make the switch, we better focus quickly on the manufacturing part, because that's where the proof of the pudding comes together. So back to you, Cecilia.
So much. First of all, I would like to thank you all. I think it was a great panel, actually. I mean, I think it's really, it captures the essence and got some really good questions. I had 10 more questions from the audience that I would like to pose, but I will send them to you, and maybe you will take the time to give the answers so we can share them with the audience later on. Thank you so much for your contribution to the Masters of Digital 2021, and hopefully see you next year again. But goodbye. Be right back in a minute with the next session. Thank you.